And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Justin Foster. Justin is an author, he's a speaker, he's a consultant, and he's the co-founder of a pretty cool consulting firm called Root and River down in Austin, Texas. Justin and I had the opportunity to meet many moons ago while working on a client project together, so that was kind of fun. So welcome. How you doing today, Justin?
Good, Peter. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. So let me start with what are the steps that you deliberately took or non-deliberately took to become a thought leader? How did this happen? Because I don't think you dressed up for Halloween as wanting to be a thought leader in
As a
second
thought
grade.
leader. Yeah, maybe I did. In hindsight, being 50 gives you a sense of the arc of time and its patterns. I think early on, Peter, so I have a very less traveled life. Just grew up on a cattle ranch in Eastern Oregon. Tried college, dropped out, got married really, really young, 18. Had my first son, Logan, when I was only just barely 22. And my career prior to launching and getting into brand strategy, brand coaching, and all that, which was 18 years ago, but my prior career was in sales and B2B technology sales. And what I learned quickly in that is that the technology is the commodity. My competitors had similar technology. What
Right.
and
Probably just as good plus or minus as yours.
Right, exactly. And a lot of it was preference and bias based, based off of what they'd heard and everything. And it was primarily for the first number of years. It was for first like 4 or 5 years. It was for retail and restaurant point of sale systems, which was less so now, a very intensely competitive marketplace.
This is back in the days of Open Table and all that, getting all that stuff
Yeah,
installed.
yeah, Micros. There was
Yep.
a product from called QuickSell 2000 that got purchased by Microsoft, and
Hmm.
there's a bunch of these tools. And what I realized that I could be an expert on the technology, but if I wanted to get deals, I needed to be an expert on their business. And so I
Okay.
immersed myself. And one of my favorite stories is I was the head of sales for a software company that sold software to retread plants of all things,
Okay.
tire retread plants. And one of the retread plants I was trying to get to buy the software, they provided tires for Swift Trucking, which is the third largest trucking company in the United States. And what I did is, because I couldn't get a return phone call from the plant manager or anything, I went to Swift and I said, I'm doing a study on the value of retreads based off of a model that was out there, and they participated in that conversation. I wrote it up as a kind of a white paper, and it was probably the first realization that I could tap into. And what happened is that I showed that white paper to the prospect, and they ended up buying the system from me because
Their client wanted. Yeah.
their
So, but I
client.
want
Yeah,
to I want to push there because that's a brilliant concept that still does not get used enough today. So I
that
think
is
most
correct.
people think in a linear way. So I'm going to create something. Maybe it's an article, maybe it's a book, maybe it's a white paper. I have sort of kind of maybe a target audience in mind that it would resonate with. After I spend weeks, months, years, whatever, developing this thing, then I need to get it out in the marketplace, and then rainbows and unicorns, right? Then good things will happen.
Right.
And I think that you can conflate business development with content development if it's done in a thoughtful way, because you could have also called the guy from the retread place and said, hey, I indirectly want to sell you some stuff, right? Probably
Yeah.
not going to take that call, but you're
Yeah.
calling to as an expert on something that they're intrigued by, interested in, is relevant to them. Of course they want to take that call, and they're in total not sales mode, right? So people in sales mode they've locked the checkbook, they're braced for, braced for impact and ready to reject everything you've got to say. If you say, I am Justin, I'm a salesman trying to sell you some stuff. But let's have a thought leadership conversation. I don't think enough people do this often enough. And it is my experience, one of the most cost-effective ways to develop relationships and build clients.
Yeah, it's such a door opener. Even now we don't do this enough. To your point of, we're going to write a piece and reach out to a CMO that we've been trying to get in front of.
Right.
Occasion we have done it and it's worked. Or we have a program called Being Marketers, which is a community actually, and we have We've used that for outreach to CMOs as to invite them on as a guest. And I think the other area, Peter, that goes way back for me is the willingness and eagerness to be a heretic. I think that it's almost impossible to be a thought leader and not be a heretic because
Okay, but stay there with me for a minute, because I think there are some that come out there and say and confuse being heretic with being outrageous, outlandic, dropping the f bomb, like being just like light my hair on fire, being carrot top,
right, yeah,
and don't be carrot top, because that's a
yeah, that's not being
Mr.
a
Carrot
heretic.
Top.
That's being an asshole. I mean,
Yeah,
so
but so thread that needle though, because I think some people say, oh, this is the things that I can do to get attention, but
right,
how do you do it in a way that's honorable as a thought leader?
right. So I think it comes from conviction, first of all, of this idea that if you're going to be a thought leader, if that's what you feel like is important to you, is that there needs to be some sort of activism in it. There needs to be some sort of change to an industry, a community, a sector in the marketplace. If you're going in and you've got your own like slightly different take than some other thought leader, it becomes a war of attrition and commoditization, which is who has the most articles on the biggest platforms and the most guests. And most of us that are thought leaders can't compete in that sort of weapons of mass destruction approach to thought leadership.
Well, and it's also a regurgitation problem. I've heard that before very differently. So I was asked yesterday, I was interviewed, to define thought leadership. And the piece of it that I'll touch on here is there's a leadership piece. You have to have the bravery, the courage, the conviction to say, here is where branding or whatever your space is, and I want to lead this conversation and it doesn't have to be crazy, but in a slightly different way, in a counterintuitive way. And I can back it up with research data, et
Yes.
cetera, et cetera. But it's the leadership piece, because a lot of people are thoughtful, right? But they're not leading. They're just, it's sort of top 10 album, like,
Yeah, that's what I refer to Michael Bublé. They're like Michael Bublé. They can be famous but have zero originality. I mean, he seems like a wonderful guy and everything, but if he didn't have David Foster, would he be famous?
right,
Probably not.
right. He'd probably be playing at your local
Yeah, yeah, he's gonna be
local
on a kind
hotel
of
or
cruise
something.
ship or in Vegas
Yeah.
or whatever, and that's fine if that's what his thing is. And I'm not being critical of him. What I'm saying is that in order to be a thought leader, you're right, Peter. You have to be a leader, and you also have to have some high emotional intelligence. You have to have a conviction of some sort, a belief in a
Sure.
better way or an alternative way to something. And the biggest one of all is there's nothing new under the sun, but still be an original.
If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts.
It's a lot like
Yeah, so but stay there for a minute, because I think that some people think that part of the process is, well, I don't want to ruffle any feathers. I want to be somewhat Canadian or Midwestern, just be polite, be nice.
be
And
nice,
and I'm, even though I'm from New York, I'm not anti-nice, but
right?
I think that sometimes people need to have the courage to say, and if you don't believe what I believe, and if you don't see the world the way that I do, that's okay too. And
Right,
in fact, if you don't get, 5, 10, 15, 20% of the folks exposed to your work going,
right.
I'm going to call BS on that, Justin, you
Yes,
probably watered it down too much.
that's right. And it goes back to if you're watering it down for consumption, then you're just participating in the sameness and you're contributing another bowl of oatmeal to the conversation.
Right. No, nobody wakes up and craves, an Elio's frozen pizza. Like
Right,
that's not right. Like that's mediocrity, right? Like
that's
you
right.
you wake up and crave like the best pizza from the best pizza joint
Right.
in New York or Chicago or
Yeah, we
whatever.
crave
But you can,
originality. We crave originality, and partially it's because we live in the too much information age. There's
yep.
there's too many thought leaders to some extent. I would also point out, Peter, that if you look at, let's take your more like say well-known thought leaders. Some of my favorites I'll just rattle off are Brene Brown,
Yep.
Ryan Holiday, Tim Ferriss, Angela Duckworth. They all have this idea in common that I said they have original ideas that are well
Mhm.
researched but are heretical in their view. So Brene Brown and vulnerability. The idea that vulnerability is the greatest act of courage and a leadership trait was really not spoken of until she made it so. And that's the
Well,
opportunity.
and the reason people believed her was
Right.
number one, she's an academic, so she's not
Yes.
some wackadoodle. She's got some serious credentials underneath her, and she ate her own dog food. She was very vulnerable
Yes.
and put herself out there
That's right.
to tell her story. So it was an interest, and I think it was a point in time where a little bit of luck doesn't hurt either.
Yeah, sure, sure. But that, that Providence is attracted to aggressiveness or boldness, So,
Right, right.
going out and doing something. And what I see people doing with thought leadership is it's thought leadership is an Olympic pool. There is no shallow end. And if you don't know what you're doing, you will drown.
Right.
And so there's no like dipping your toe in. You just freaking go in and get in the water and start doing it. And but I would also say is that if you don't have anything to say, don't make something up just because you want to be a thought leader. Do the inner
Well,
work.
so but those are two counterbalancing issues, right? So there's the one school that says ready, fire, aim. All right, I got an idea. Let me get it out there because the market, and by the way, get it out there quickly. We call it minimum viable thought leadership. What can I get out there to test this idea? And by the way, the world will tell you pretty quickly if it's a crappy idea or a good idea. And I wouldn't invest a year of your life writing a book to test an idea. I'd invest a couple hours and throw a couple of blog posts out there to resonate, right? So how do you sort of thread that where it's I got to get it out there quickly to test it. And then the other piece is, well, I just have to get things out because I got to get things out to keep my name on top, but I'm not really saying anything. And I think people see through that pretty quickly.
Yeah, I agree. Yes. And there's pablum there, kind of an insipidness or shallowness to it. It's like a lot of books, business books, which are really just kind of like puffed up, Harvard Business Review articles. That's why you can read a summary of the book and get the book most of the time.
Well, there's the left-handed compliment. There was the TED Talk that should have stayed a TED Talk, and then there were very few TED Talks that are worthy of a book, right? Because a TED Talk, I can get the essence of it, or a Harvard Business Review in 20, 30 minutes. A book is I don't care about the $25, but now you're asking for 5-6 hours of my life. The exchange rate of that is, you better give me something more. There needs to be more meat on the bone.
Right. And so I love the idea of a minimum viable thought leadership. And so, and our philosophy with this is you brand slow, or you slow down to brand so you can speed up to market. So in this case, with thought leadership, what I mean by brand is you have to know who you are at your core. This is one of the worst things you can do with a marketing strategy is go into it with an existential identity crisis, because the market's not going to tell you who you are. You have to know that. You have to be deeply convicted about and aware of who you are.
And it's not a game of Clue. Like, I don't have the time to decode what is Justin about. You need to hit me square between the eyes and talk to me like I'm a 9-year-old and say, this is who I am. This is what I'm about. Loud and clear, neon lights.
Yes, exactly. The other aspect of brand is having something to say, having what we call a leadership point of view. And if you don't have anything to say, like I said earlier, then you're not ready for thought leadership. So have something to say. And the third thing, then you get into the execution. And then that's going to vary depending on what the strategy is. But the third thing is you got to know who you're talking to. So in our case of thought leadership, we're speaking to an archetype that we call defiers. And these are founders, CEOs, heads of marketing that have a propensity or an attraction to doing things differently because it gives them joy.
So wait, stay. So we could talk for hours. So to me, I would call that an avatar. Right?
Yes.
So you've come up with this avatar.
Yeah, same idea.
Called a defier. And the way you describe that is exactly how we think about it, is there are demographic characteristics, but if you don't wrap that around some psychographics, it's nothing. Because you and I are both, sort of white males of a certain age, a certain income bracket. So what? Like, okay, there were tens of millions of others.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But the defier, as soon as I hear that, I lean in and go, oh, okay, so someone's probably in a decision-making place.
Yes.
Probably questions authority, probably is a lifelong learner, probably is results oriented. I'm just surmising here. And I'm like, oh, now that you tell me you're a defier, if someone's a complier, right, or I just made that up, they're probably not for you and you're not for them. And that's okay.
That's okay. That's why we have a warning label on our website.
I love that.
That's what it says, warning label. And So if you do those things, now we can think about speed to market, and that's really, not my area of expertise is what thought leadership platforms. I know you're a master at well, all of this, but specifically the kind of the right fit for the right strategy of
Right,
what it is.
right.
What I do know, Peter, is this, and this is more meta than anything, is you do the thing that you already have energy for. If you like talking, start a podcast, or now get on Clubhouse or something.
Yep.
If you like shooting video, if that process gives you energy, do that. If you like writing, do that. Just do something with thought
I would challenge that a little bit. I would say yes and, right?
Okay.
So I think about that in terms of everybody's got their preferred canvas, right?
Yeah.
So some people like to write. Some people like to speak. However, you can't do that in a vacuum, meaning, if you're an academic and you write in academies, which is a fancy word for, language that nobody else will read, and you're trying to get to a mainstream business audience and you're not willing to flex, you're going to fail.
That's
Right?
right.
If you're going after, a certain generation and you're not on certain platforms, or if your business is very visual and you're not on Instagram, that's going to hurt you. So I think you do have to stretch it a little.
Yeah, I agree. And just to be clear, what I'm saying is do the things you have for energy for first.
Okay, good.
Not do the other, because there's a force multiplier behind that. There was I always remember the story of Elvis before every concert would sit at a piano behind the stage and play gospel music. He was doing what he had energy for, and that got him that and uppers, got him going.
Right. and banana peanut butter sandwiches and 15-year-olds.
Exactly.
But that's a whole other story.
But there's some lessons in that of doing the things that at first that you have energy for, so that gives you a different perspective. If it's all a grind, then you're working on the wrong problem.
No, I agree. So if it's easier for you to get your stuff out there in video, whip out your iPhone, do some stuff on video, then you could refine that into the written word, etc. If you're more comfortable with a cup of tea at a keyboard, banging it out in words, then do that. Yeah, I dig that. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, this is we pack more conversation per minute. Like stand-up comedians have LPM. Have you heard of LPM?
No, was it laughs per minute or something?
Laughs per minute, and they measure that. And it's like you want to average, like a good comedian is 3.5 laughs per minute or something like that. And
really?
I think that when you and I talk, we have a TLPM, thought leadership.
Well, and then we got Elvis and Michael Bublé in there. I was going to ask you to take us out with a bad lounge act of the love child of those
my
two.
whole career is a bad lounge act. What do you mean?
Exactly. Are there good lounge acts? I don't think so. Lounge anymore. I'm ready for any lounge these days.
Right, that's true. Except a cruise. I still don't want to go on a cruise, mostly because other people go on cruises. So
yeah,
by myself, that would be awesome.
A cruise by yourself? Yeah. I'm like, that's not a petri dish for
everything gross, right? Anyway, we'll leave on that.
All right, so one day we'll get you your own cruise ship. That'll be your thing. Like no lines at the buffet,
nothing. Right, exactly. All some food.
Would you bring anyone, or would it be just totally lonely?
It would be like by hand selection.
Okay.
It's how evangelicals treat heaven. So.
On that note, well, cool. Well, this has been great as always, Justin. We will have to come up with a metric of our TL per minute, because I think that's true. It's a pretty dense conversation, so you might want to listen again. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.